Clara had never expected the countryside to feel so alive, so full of quiet secrets, yet here she was, standing at the edge of the garden behind the old manor she had inherited just weeks ago, the air thick with the scent of roses, lavender, and freshly cut grass, sunlight spilling in golden streams between the branches of tall trees, painting the ground in dappled patterns that made her chest feel lighter, almost as if the garden itself was breathing, waiting for her, and she stepped carefully onto the cobblestone path, heels clicking softly against the stones, her eyes scanning the flower beds, neatly arranged with colors that seemed to sing in harmony, deep reds and soft pinks, yellows like morning light, and purples that whispered of mysteries, all of them in perfect order, yet carrying a sense of wild freedom in the way some blooms leaned into the sunlight while others hid in the shade, and she felt a strange pull toward this place, a magnetic attraction she couldn't explain, as though the garden held something for her alone, something she had been missing without realizing it, her fingers brushing along the petals of a rose as she walked, soft and velvety, the thorns pricking lightly, reminding her that beauty and pain often grew together, and she smiled faintly, thinking of the life she had left behind in the city, the constant noise, the hurried pace, the endless deadlines, and how different this place felt, slower, deeper, more honest, a world where moments lingered like a favorite melody. And as she wandered deeper into the garden, she noticed him, Ethan, the gardener, kneeling by a row of tulips, hands buried in soil, shirt sleeves rolled up, arms dusted with dirt, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face, and he moved with a calm, deliberate precision, planting, pruning, adjusting, as if every action carried purpose, and Clara froze for a moment, unsure if she should speak, not wanting to disturb the quiet rhythm of his work, yet feeling inexplicably drawn to him, a pull that made her heart beat faster, and when he finally looked up, his eyes met hers, steady, thoughtful, with a hint of surprise and something else she couldn't name, a gentle curiosity, and for a brief second, the world outside the garden, the inheritance, the papers, the responsibilities, slipped away, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves, the hum of distant bees, and the sound of her own breath mingling with the quiet energy of the garden, and then he smiled. Not a casual smile, but one that felt like recognition, like he had been waiting for her presence, and Clara returned it, unsure why, feeling warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and something deeper, a sense of connection she hadn't anticipated, and she took another step forward, letting her hand graze the petals of the tulips, noticing the way they leaned toward Ethan as if acknowledging him, and she wondered who he was beyond the gardener she had seen from the windows, someone who moved quietly through the mornings, invisible yet essential, and suddenly, his voice broke the silence, soft, low, carrying an intimacy she wasn't prepared for. Some flowers bloom only when they feel heard, he said, tilting his head toward a patch of roses that seemed more vibrant than the others, their colors almost glowing in the afternoon sun, and Clara blinked, surprised by the weight of his words, feeling them settle in her chest like a warm hand on a cold day. And she realized she had no idea what he meant exactly, yet the words resonated, making her think of her own life, the parts of herself that had been ignored, hidden, or neglected, and she felt a sudden courage to speak, to step closer, to bridge the distance between them, and she said, almost instinctively, "I think I understand. Sometimes, people need the same thing." Ethan's gaze softened, a flicker of recognition passing through his eyes, and for a moment, the garden felt suspended, as if time had paused to allow this meeting, this fragile exchange, to take root, and then he stood, brushing soil from his hands, moving toward her with slow, deliberate steps that mirrored the patience in his words, and Clara felt her pulse quicken, the air charged with unspoken possibilities, and when he reached her, he stopped just short, close enough to feel the warmth of his presence, yet not crossing a line that neither had defined, and he said again, quietly, "It's strange, isn't it? How a place can make you feel something you didn't know was inside you." Clara nodded, unable to speak immediately, her heart pounding, emotions swirling between curiosity, admiration, and a strange, almost unnameable longing, and she realized in that moment that the garden was no longer just a garden. It had become a space of revelation, a place where emotions could grow as naturally as the flowers themselves, and she felt a shiver of anticipation, a flutter of something new stirring inside her, and Ethan tilted his head, studying her face, as if searching for answers in the delicate lines of her expression, the way her eyes held both caution and interest, the slight quiver of her lips as she tried to form words, and Clara finally found her voice, soft but steady. "I never expected to feel this here." Ethan smiled again, gently, almost tenderly, and replied, "Perhaps some things are meant to find you when you least expect them, in the quiet corners you never thought to look." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of the roses and the faint whisper of lavender, rustling through the leaves, creating a symphony of subtle sounds around them, and Clara felt a sudden clarity, a deep sense that her life, which had felt so ordinary and constrained, was opening into something new, something unpredictable, something that might challenge her in ways she had both feared and longed for, and yet, standing there, facing Ethan, she felt safe, seen, and strangely hopeful, as if the garden itself was offering a promise that beauty and connection could thrive even in unexpected places. Time seemed to stretch and fold, each second filled with potential, and the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over Ethan's face, highlighting the strength in his jaw, the kindness in his eyes, the quiet dignity in the way he carried himself, and Clara couldn't help but feel a pull, a desire to linger, to talk, to share this moment, yet part of her hesitated, aware that this encounter was delicate, fragile, like a newly opened bud that could easily close if mishandled, and she wondered about the stories Ethan carried, the thoughts he never voiced, the hidden layers beneath his calm exterior, and she longed to uncover them, to understand the man behind the gardener's hands, the one who spoke in quiet wisdom through small gestures and simple words. And then Ethan reached for a watering can, moving toward a row of newly planted roses, and Clara followed, almost instinctively, wanting to be near him, to witness the care he put into every bloom, to see the patience in the way he nurtured life, and as they worked side by side, their hands brushing occasionally, fleeting touches that sent sparks through her nerves, she felt the unspoken tension between them, the growing awareness of feelings neither fully acknowledged, and she realized that something significant had shifted, something she couldn't name yet but knew would linger in her heart, shaping her thoughts, coloring her dreams, and as the shadows grew longer, stretching across the garden, Clara finally whispered, "I think I could stay here forever, just watching the flowers grow." Ethan glanced at her, a soft smile playing at the corners of his lips, and said, "Perhaps some people are like gardens themselves. They only need someone patient enough to see them bloom." Those words settled deep inside her, intertwining with the gentle ache in her chest, the stirring of curiosity, attraction, and an unspoken connection, and as they continued tending the flowers, side by side in the fading light, Clara felt that the ordinary world outside the garden, her responsibilities, her worries, her past life, had receded, leaving only the quiet intimacy of shared presence, the thrill of discovery, and the promise of something that could grow between them, something tender, delicate, and unforgettable. And as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in shades of gold and shadow, she knew that this day, this moment, this first encounter with Ethan in the garden, would remain with her forever, a memory etched in her heart, carrying the hint of beginnings, the weight of emotions yet unexplored, and the soft, lingering whisper of a connection that had only just begun, leaving her both exhilarated and apprehensive, ready for whatever might come next in the quiet, blooming world of the garden. After that first encounter in the garden, Clara found herself drawn back day after day, unable to resist the quiet allure of the flowers and, more importantly, the presence of Ethan, whose calm demeanor and gentle attention seemed to speak directly to the part of her heart that had long been silent, and each time she approached, she felt a mixture of excitement and hesitation, a flutter in her chest that made ordinary moments feel charged with unspoken meaning. And she noticed that Ethan too seemed aware of their connection, though he never rushed it, moving through the garden with the same careful, deliberate movements, his hands brushing against the blooms with tenderness, occasionally glancing at her with a subtle smile that made her pulse quicken, and over the weeks, their brief conversations grew into something more substantial, small moments stretching into lingering exchanges, laughter slipping between them like petals carried by the wind, and Clara began to look forward to these encounters more than anything else, feeling the monotony of her previous life dissolve in the warmth of these shared hours, yet there was an underlying tension she couldn't ignore, a sense that both of them were aware of feelings neither dared to name aloud, and one rainy afternoon, when the clouds hung low and heavy, casting a silver-gray light over the garden, Clara arrived to find Ethan carefully covering a bed of delicate roses, his movements slow and protective, shielding them from the falling raindrops, and she paused under the veranda, watching the scene unfold, captivated by the quiet focus in his eyes and the way droplets clung to his hair and sleeves, and she felt her heart ache with a mix of admiration and longing, wishing she could bridge the distance between them, touch the same earth, feel the rain on her skin, and yet knowing she had to wait for the right moment, for permission of some invisible kind, and as the rain fell, she noticed the rhythm of his actions, each movement precise, deliberate, almost meditative, and she realized that this attention to detail, this care, extended beyond the flowers, reflecting something deeper in him, a tenderness that he reserved for moments he deemed worthy, and her chest tightened with both curiosity and desire, the ache of wanting to know him more intimately, beyond the polite smiles and casual conversation, while still respecting the quiet boundaries that existed, and as the rain intensified, Ethan looked up, noticing her watching, and their eyes met, the unspoken acknowledgement of shared emotions passing between them like a secret, and then he spoke, his voice low, almost hesitant, carrying a weight that made her ears tingle. There are truths I've kept hidden, my feelings I never knew how to share, and Clara felt a jolt through her heart, the words settling over her like a gentle storm, stirring both anticipation and fear, wondering what he meant, what truths lay behind those carefully measured words, and why her chest felt so tight at the simple sound of his voice, and she stepped closer, despite the rain, letting her fingers brush against a rose, feeling the damp petals, and for a moment, the world outside the garden, her work, her responsibilities, the noise of the city, seemed irrelevant, fading into nothing, leaving only the rain, the flowers, and the fragile tension between them, and she realized she had been longing for something like this, a connection that felt real, deep, and unhurried, yet she was unsure if she was ready to admit it, even to herself. The vulnerability of hope and desire weighing heavily on her, and Ethan seemed to sense her hesitation, his eyes softening, reflecting the same unspoken questions, the same quiet yearning, and he took a small step closer, careful, deliberate, yet enough to make the space between them shrink, and Clara felt a shiver run through her, the electricity of proximity, the sudden awareness of possibility, and she wondered if he felt it too, if the careful, measured words he spoke hit a heart racing as fast as hers. And as the rain pattered against the leaves, they stood in silence, the tension stretching yet comforting, a promise unspoken, a question lingering, and Clara realized that the garden had become more than a sanctuary. It had become a place where hearts could be revealed slowly, where emotions could surface without fear of judgment, where longing and attraction could bloom like the flowers surrounding them, and she felt an aching joy in the simple fact of being seen, truly seen, by someone whose presence felt both safe and thrilling. And Ethan finally spoke again, softer this time, almost a whisper, "I've always admired how patient you are, how you notice things others overlook," and Clara felt her cheeks warm, the compliment carrying more than just words, hinting at an understanding, a recognition that made her feel cherished and significant, and she responded, her voice trembling slightly, "And I've noticed you, more than you know," and the admission hung in the air, delicate yet powerful, creating a bridge between them that neither could ignore, and the rain, once a backdrop, seemed to amplify their closeness, a private symphony, each drop marking the passage of time, the growth of feelings, the subtle dance of two hearts edging toward something deeper, and Clara felt her pulse quicken, awareness sharpening, realizing that every gesture, every glance, every careful word mattered, that this connection was fragile and precious, and that stepping too fast or too slow could alter the course of what was unfolding, yet the risk felt worth it, thrilling in its promise, and Ethan, sensing the shift, lowered his gaze momentarily, gathering courage, before speaking again. "There's a part of me I don't share easily. I hide it, even from myself sometimes. But with you, it feels different," and Clara's breath caught, a rush of emotions sweeping through her, joy, fear, desire, longing, all intermingling, a complex melody of feelings she hadn't anticipated, and she realized that she too had been hiding parts of herself, emotions she hadn't acknowledged, thoughts she hadn't dared to speak, and now, in this shared space, something delicate and extraordinary was beginning to take root, something she wanted to nurture, yet also feared, for the heart is fragile and longing can be painful if not returned fully, and she noticed the subtle tremor in Ethan's hands as he adjusted a plant, the way his eyes softened, the slight hesitancy in his words, and she recognized that he too was navigating this unfamiliar terrain, balancing desire and restraint, attraction and caution, and the thought made her heart ache with empathy, admiration, and a deepening curiosity, wanting to know the man beneath the gardener's hands, to uncover his thoughts, his dreams, his fears, to be part of his world, even if only in small moments. And as the rain continued, their conversation grew easier, flowing naturally, stories shared, laughter escaping between them, moments of silence comfortable and charged with unspoken meaning, and Clara felt a sense of intimacy she had rarely experienced, the connection both exhilarating and tender, like a fragile bloom about to open fully, and she realized that in this garden, in these hours with Ethan, she was learning about patience, about the beauty of noticing, about the quiet power of small gestures and careful words, and that the heart could speak in subtle ways without ever needing grand declarations, and yet the longing persisted, a quiet ache in her chest, wondering what might happen if they allowed themselves to cross the invisible line, if they embraced the emotions slowly growing between them, and she knew that each day, each encounter, was a step toward understanding, toward trust, toward something potentially extraordinary. And as the rain began to lighten, the clouds breaking to reveal thin strips of sunlight, she felt a quiet determination, a resolve to continue returning to the garden, to nurture this connection, to explore the unspoken feelings, and to honor the delicate beauty of what was unfolding, knowing that in the careful tending of hearts, as in the tending of flowers, patience, attention, and courage were required. And in that moment, as Ethan glanced her way, offering a small, shy smile, Clara felt a mixture of hope, anticipation, and the thrilling uncertainty of possibility, realizing that life could be more vivid, more tender, more alive than she had ever imagined, that the heart could open in ways unexpected, and that even the briefest moments of shared attention, understanding, and attraction could leave a lasting impression, planting seeds of emotion that might grow into something remarkable. And as she turned to leave that afternoon, the garden seemed to hum softly around her, the flowers nodding in the breeze, the earth rich and fertile beneath their feet, and Clara knew that she would return, again and again, to see what might bloom, to see what words, what gestures, what shared silences might reveal, and that the quiet longing she felt was only the beginning of a story she had yet to fully understand, a story that would unfold with the patience and care of a gardener tending to the most delicate of roses. And she carried that thought with her as she walked back toward the manor, heart alight with possibilities, mind spinning with questions, and the soft, lingering memory of Ethan's words, his presence, and the tender magic of the garden, leaving her both exhilarated and apprehensive, knowing that something unforgettable had begun, a connection neither of them fully understood yet, but one that promised to grow, slowly, beautifully, and inevitably, as long as they allowed themselves to be seen and to see. And as she reached the door of the manor, rain-soaked and heart-racing, she looked back once, catching a glimpse of Ethan returning to his work, and in that glance, the unspoken promise passed between them, silent, delicate, powerful, leaving Clara with a flutter of anticipation, a whisper of hope, and a certainty that her life, her heart, and her understanding of love had already begun to change. In the quiet, blooming sanctuary of the garden, the evening had settled softly over the garden, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, and Clara lingered longer than usual, feeling the warmth of the day fade and the anticipation in her chest grow heavier with every passing moment, the air thick with the scent of roses and damp earth, a delicate tension weaving between her and Ethan, who was kneeling among the flower beds, his hands steady but careful as he adjusted the fragile stems, and she watched him, heart beating faster, noticing the small details, the way his fingers brushed the soil, the subtle curve of his smile, the quiet strength in his posture, the deep thoughtfulness in his eyes, and she felt a sudden, inexplicable longing, a need to be closer, to understand the man behind the gentle gardener, the one whose words and presence had stirred emotions she had never dared to name. And as she stepped forward, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot made him glance up, his gaze meeting hers with a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and something tender, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had been growing steadily, delicately, over the weeks they had spent together, and Clara felt her chest tighten, realizing that this moment, this quiet twilight in the garden, could change everything, yet she was unsure how to navigate the fragile boundary between friendship and something more, something unspoken but undeniable, and Ethan rose slowly, brushing soil from his hands, the movement deliberate, careful, and he approached her, his eyes never leaving hers, carrying a weight of unvoiced emotions that made her pulse quicken, and the silence between them stretched, heavy with possibility, with the promise of something neither had fully admitted, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words, full of longing, anticipation, and cautious hope. And Clara, emboldened by the soft golden light, whispered, "Ethan, there's something I need to say," her voice barely carrying over the gentle rustle of leaves, and he nodded slightly, encouraging her, the faintest quiver of nerves betraying the calm exterior he usually maintained, and she felt a thrill of connection, knowing that they were both vulnerable in this shared moment, hearts exposed, yet safe. And she continued, "I've felt, more than I thought I would, something I didn't expect, and I can't keep pretending it's just the garden, or just the work we do together." And Ethan's eyes softened, reflecting the same emotions she felt, and he stepped a little closer, careful not to rush, letting the space between them shrink just enough for their energy to mingle, the garden around them alive with the soft whisper of petals and the distant hum of insects settling for the night. And he finally spoke, his voice low, deliberate, and tender, "Clara, I've been feeling the same, but I didn't know how to say it without risking everything, the friendship, the comfort of these quiet moments, the balance we've found here." And she felt a surge of relief and joy, a mixture of exhilaration and fear, knowing that the delicate tension she had sensed all along was mutual, that the attraction, the longing, and the emotional connection were shared, a revelation that made her heart ache and soar at the same time. And she reached out instinctively, letting her hand hover near his, feeling the warmth emanating from him, the subtle shift in energy, the unspoken question lingering in the space between them. And Ethan noticed, a soft smile touching his lips, and he said, "It's frightening, isn't it? To admit that something so fragile could also be so strong." And Clara nodded, the truth of his words resonating deeply, for she too had felt the fear of losing what they had, of letting desire ruin the slow, steady bond that had grown in these quiet days. And yet, the heart's longing was undeniable, impossible to ignore, and she felt a thrill in the idea that perhaps, together, they could navigate this new terrain, exploring emotions with care, patience, and honesty. And as the sunlight waned, casting long shadows across the flower beds, they moved closer, not in haste but in deliberate steps, each action measured, each glance loaded with meaning, the world outside the garden receding into irrelevance, leaving only the two of them and the fragile, precious moment they were crafting. And Ethan finally reached out, his fingers brushing against hers, tentative, delicate, sparking a warmth that traveled up Clara's arm and settled in her chest, and she felt her breath catch, a shiver of anticipation and joy, knowing that this small touch carried more than physical connection, it carried acknowledgement, respect, and the promise of shared emotions. And she smiled, the tension between excitement and fear mingling, a perfect storm of human feeling. And Ethan's eyes softened further, reflecting the mixture of longing and care he felt, and he said, almost in a whisper, "Clara, I've wanted to tell you for so long, but I was afraid that admitting this would change everything. Yet I can't ignore it anymore." And Clara's heart raced, emotions colliding in a wave of exhilaration, relief, and desire, for she understood exactly what he meant, the risk, the vulnerability, the thrill of stepping into something unknown but potentially beautiful. And she replied softly, "I understand. I feel the same, more than I can put into words, and I want to see where this leads, even if it's scary." And the words, once spoken, seemed to lift a weight from both of them, leaving the air around them charged with possibility, the garden glowing in the soft light of twilight, petals trembling in a gentle breeze as if echoing the excitement and nervousness coursing through their hearts. And they stood there, hands almost touching, eyes locked, each aware of the subtle rhythm of the other's breathing, the quiet pounding of hearts, the magnetic pull of emotions neither had dared to fully express until now. And Clara realized that the weeks of small glances, fleeting touches, shared laughter, and silent understanding had built a foundation stronger than she could have imagined, a delicate yet unshakable bond that could now begin to grow into something deeper, tender, and lasting. And Ethan, sensing her awareness, let his hand hover near hers, a gentle question lingering in the gesture, the unspoken invitation to bridge the distance. And Clara, trembling with excitement and cautious hope, finally closed the space, letting her fingertips brush his, a soft, electric connection that made them both inhale sharply, and in that instant, the world seemed to narrow, leaving only the warmth, the shared emotions, and the tender thrill of newfound intimacy. And Ethan smiled, a mix of relief, joy, and longing in his expression, and he said, "So this is the beginning, isn't it? The start of something, fragile, but ours." And Clara nodded, tears prickling her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of recognition, shared vulnerability, and the sudden, thrilling awareness that her life was changing, that this connection, slow and deliberate, tender and sincere, had the potential to become something remarkable. And as the sun dipped lower, casting the garden in shades of deep orange and violet, they continued to stand close, hands brushing, eyes locked, sharing words and silence in equal measure, building a delicate intimacy, a trust, and a longing that neither could deny. And Clara felt a deep, resonant joy, knowing that whatever came next, this moment, the first full acknowledgement of mutual feelings, the tentative yet deliberate step toward love, would remain etched in her heart forever, a memory of possibility, tenderness, and emotional awakening. And Ethan, sensing her thoughts, leaned slightly closer, whispering, "We'll take it slowly. Together, one moment at a time, and let it grow naturally, like the flowers we care for." And Clara smiled, the tension in her chest easing into warmth, excitement, and anticipation, for she knew that patience, care, and honesty would guide them, that the fear of loss was real but outweighed by the thrill of connection. And as night fell, leaving the garden bathed in soft moonlight, petals glistening with dew, they finally allowed themselves to relax, sharing a quiet, contented breath, hearts beating in tandem, minds filled with hope, wonder, and a delicate awareness that the journey they were beginning together could be as beautiful, tender, and unforgettable as the flowers surrounding them. And Clara realized that the magic of the garden, the patience of Ethan, and the courage to voice feelings long held back had created a space where love could begin, gently, deliberately, and profoundly, leaving her both exhilarated and serene, ready for whatever the next day would bring. Carrying the memory of this twilight, this acknowledgement, this first step towards something lasting, precious, and deeply, irrevocably emotional, the garden had never felt more alive to Clara than on that afternoon. The sunlight filtering through the trees in gentle streams, casting golden patterns on the cobblestones and flower beds, and she lingered at the entrance, her heart a mixture of anticipation, nervousness, and hope, for today she had decided she could no longer hide her feelings, could no longer keep them tethered to unspoken words and fleeting glances. And as she stepped forward, she saw Ethan kneeling among the roses, carefully trimming the stems, his hands steady yet gentle, fingers brushing the petals with a reverence that made her chest tighten. And she watched him for a moment, feeling a surge of affection and admiration, noticing the way his hair fell across his forehead, the soft lines of concentration in his face, and the quiet, patient way he moved, each motion deliberate, as if caring for the flowers mirrored the care he wished to extend to everything in his life. And she took a deep breath, summoning courage she hadn't realized she possessed, and approached him, the subtle crunch of leaves underfoot announcing her presence. And Ethan looked up, eyes lighting with recognition and something tender, almost hesitant, a delicate vulnerability that mirrored her own. And Clara felt a jolt of emotion, the weight of weeks of longing and quiet understanding converging into this single moment, and she spoke, voice low but steady, "Ethan, I can't ignore this anymore. Whatever we feel, I want to see where it leads." And he blinked, a flash of relief and hope crossing his face, and then a slow, soft smile broke across his lips, warming the space between them. And he rose, brushing soil from his hands, moving toward her with careful steps that made her pulse race, their eyes locked, holding a conversation of unspoken emotions, hesitation, excitement, and the thrill of possibility. And when he reached her, he extended a hand, trembling slightly, not from uncertainty, but from the intensity of emotion he had been holding back. And Clara took it, feeling the warmth, the strength, and the careful gentleness in his touch. And the world around them, the roses, the trees, the soft hum of bees, the distant rustle of the wind, faded into a quiet background, leaving only the closeness, the connection, and the unspoken promise blooming between them. And Ethan's voice was soft, yet full of conviction. "Then let's promise that no matter what, we'll nurture this, like the garden. Patiently, carefully, and honestly." And Clara felt her eyes well with tears, not from sadness but from the overwhelming beauty of shared understanding and mutual longing, knowing that this promise was fragile yet strong, delicate yet enduring, and she nodded, feeling the gentle surge of love, excitement, and hope radiate through her chest, the kind of feeling that makes ordinary moments shimmer with meaning. And together, they walked through the garden, hands brushing, fingers entwining slowly, as though discovering each other again, feeling the rhythm of shared hearts, the subtle electricity of closeness. And with each step, Clara noticed the small things she had always admired about Ethan, the patience in his gestures, the softness in his gaze, the way he seemed attuned to the life around him, the care in every word, every glance. And she realized that love, like the flowers he nurtured, required attention, care, and time, and she felt exhilaration at the thought of cultivating it together, slowly, intentionally, with reverence for the delicate beginnings of something extraordinary. And as they reached the center of the garden, where a small fountain trickled gently, Clara stopped, letting the sun cast a warm glow across her face, and Ethan paused beside her, their shoulders almost touching, a comfortable closeness, a shared presence that spoke volumes more than words ever could. And he said, softly, almost a whisper, I want to know you completely, Clara, every thought, every fear, every joy, and I want you to know me too, not rushed, not forced, just slowly, with care. And she smiled, the depth of emotion in his words settling over her like sunlight, and she replied, I want that too, Ethan. I've felt this connection growing, this pull, and I'm ready to explore it with you, carefully, tenderly, together. And the air around them seemed to shimmer, the flowers bending slightly in the breeze, the fragrance of roses filling their senses, the moment both private and eternal, a space where two hearts could finally meet without pretense. And they stood there for a while, talking quietly, sharing stories, memories, and dreams, laughter spilling gently into the garden, punctuated by comfortable silence, the kind that signifies deep intimacy, understanding, and trust. And Clara felt her heart swell with gratitude and joy, realizing that the slow, deliberate development of their feelings had made this connection even more precious, delicate yet powerful. And as the afternoon waned, golden light stretching across petals and leaves, Ethan carefully picked a rose and handed it to Clara, brushing his fingers against hers in a fleeting yet electrifying touch. And she accepted it, feeling the symbolism in the gesture, a token of care, attention, and the beauty of something growing naturally, tenderly, and unhurried. And she said, her voice soft, I'll cherish it, just like I'll cherish this, us. And he nodded, eyes shimmering with emotion, a small, grateful smile playing on his lips. And the garden seemed to hold its breath, the flowers standing tall and proud as witnesses to this delicate, unfolding love. And they continued walking, talking, and laughing, discovering comfort in proximity, pleasure in shared glances, excitement in the subtle acknowledgement of attraction. And in those hours, Clara felt the steady, exhilarating shift from longing to mutual understanding, from hesitation to gentle, intentional intimacy. And she realized that love, like the garden, required patience, attention, and courage, and that by giving themselves the time to nurture it carefully, they were creating something resilient, beautiful, and unforgettable. And Ethan, noticing her thoughtful gaze, leaned slightly closer, whispering, I don't want to rush anything, but I want every moment with you to matter, to grow, to become something lasting. And Clara nodded, overwhelmed by the sincerity, tenderness, and clarity in his words, knowing that these intentions were as vital as any grand declaration. And together they sat on a small bench surrounded by blooms, hands brushing occasionally, sharing quiet words and soft laughter, feeling the depth of connection grow with each passing minute, the emotional intimacy deepening. And Clara felt a sense of peace, exhilaration, and profound joy, understanding that the journey they were beginning was as important as the destination. And that love, like a garden, required careful tending, mutual respect, patience, and devotion. And in that moment, she let herself lean slightly closer, feeling the warmth of Ethan's shoulder near hers, the gentle brush of his fingers as he adjusted a fallen petal, and the quiet comfort of mutual presence enveloped her, a soothing, thrilling, and deeply emotional embrace of shared humanity. And as the sun dipped lower, leaving the sky painted in shades of pink and lavender, they stood together, watching the light fade, sharing a soft, contented breath, hearts in synchrony, minds filled with hope, wonder, and the quiet thrill of something new yet profoundly familiar. And Clara realized that this garden, these hours, and this connection were transforming her, teaching her the beauty of patience, the courage to feel, and the joy of being truly seen. And as Ethan finally took her hand fully, their fingers entwining naturally, a gentle squeeze sealing an unspoken promise. She felt a warmth and certainty she had never known, the kind that makes ordinary days extraordinary, and he whispered, "We'll grow this together, one day at a time, like everything else that matters," and she smiled, eyes glistening, heart racing, knowing that the journey ahead would be filled with tenderness, challenges, laughter, shared vulnerability, and deepening love. And in the quiet glow of twilight, surrounded by flowers that had witnessed countless seasons, they allowed themselves to simply be, fully present, hearts open, spirits intertwined, embracing the beauty of careful beginnings, the thrill of possibility, and the extraordinary joy of discovering love slowly, deliberately, and profoundly, knowing that the garden would always be their sanctuary, a place where emotions could bloom, connection could deepen, and their story, gentle, romantic, and unforgettable, would continue to unfold, one tender, intentional, and magical day at a time.